Right, salutations, gentle viewers. I'm George from Ireland. So this is a video about Terence O'Neill. It was requested by one of my innumerable faithful viewers. So Terence O'Neill was the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland from 1966 to 69. He's known for his unavailing attempt to reform Northern Ireland to make unionism appealing to more Catholics. Since Paul Rose, an American sociologist who did his study in Northern Ireland in 1969, he concluded only 5% of Catholics voted for the Unionist Party, and rather fewer Protestants voted for the Nationalist Party. There were other Catholics who were pro-union, if not unionists, voted for the Northern Ireland Labour Party, which wanted to keep Northern Ireland in the UK, but didn't make a song and a dance of it. Anyway, so Terence O'Neill was born in London in 1914. He's a posthumous child. That's to say, his father had died before that. His father had been killed in the Battle of the Marne in France. First World War had begun just weeks earlier. So Terence O'Neill had the middle name Marne in recognition of the battle where his father was killed. So Terence O'Neill was very much out of the top drawer. He was blue blood and broad acres. He was brought up in a Protestant family, worshipping the Church of Ireland when he was back in Tyrone, which his family was from, and the Church of England when he was in England. So I don't like the term Anglo-Irish, but he was what people would be called Anglo-Irish. Now, although he had the surname O'Neill, that in a sense was an affectation, because his family had come to Ireland in the 17th century, and they were of English descent. I'm not sure if they had any Irish ancestry prior to that, but he was Irish. I accept him as that. But really they had some typically English surname, but they dropped that because the local Gaelic chieftain who dominated that area of Ireland had the surname O'Neill, Hugh O'Neill, the Great O'Neill, A. Moore, as people called him, who'd rebelled against Elizabeth I. But anyway, as Terence O'Neill's family claimed to be the new magnates in the area, they adopted the surname of the people they'd pushed out. Anyway, so he grew up in a stately home in Tyrone, but made regular trips to London, and he had his education entirely in England. I forget which prep school he was at, but then he went to Eton. Now, his mother was elected to the Parliament of Northern Ireland, Stormont. Of course, the Partition of Ireland, or the Government of Ireland Act, 1920. Pursuant to that, the Parliament of Northern Ireland was established. First met in June 1921, opened by George V, who exhorted Irishmen to stretch out the hand of forbearance and absolve each other. This is when the first troubled times was on. But the Parliament of Northern Ireland didn't have a purpose-built edifice, so they met in a Presbyterian seminary, which might confirm Catholic fears that this really was run for the prods. Anyway, they built one planned for this purpose called Stormont, which is just to the east of Belfast on that road to Newton Ards, but was only finished about 1930. So that's why we often call it Stormont, as in the Northern Irish Parliament. So there were very few women in politics in those days. Well, she's a very grand lady, had all the right connections, and that was that. So materially, Terence O'Neill wanted for nothing. So he went to Eton. As I say, he wasn't a particularly bookish sort. He was Irish, he was British, didn't see any contradiction there. I'm not sure if he called himself Ulster, certainly at that stage. Then Unionists started referring to Northern Ireland as Ulster, which is inaccurate, because Ulster is 9 counties, not just 6. Remember, Donegal, Cavan and Monaghan are Ulster counties. They remained in the Irish state, or they didn't remain in the UK, perhaps put it like that. But all right, boundaries shift, and the meaning of words changes, including toponyms. For instance, at one time, Louth would have been considered part of Ulster, or Clare was once regarded as part of Connacht, and so forth, which is why the Boyne, the southern boundary of County Louth, and that really was the edge of Ulster. I'm not sure at the time of 1690 if it was considered to be the southern edge of Ulster. Anyway, so then he decided he wanted to join the Irish Guards, his father's regiment, and he went to Sandhurst, that's the Royal Military Academy, very close to Eton, in fact, and he did the 2-year course, and he passed out successfully. So commissioned into the Irish Guards. That's one of those regiments of foot guards. If you ever see Buckingham Palace, those chaps in the scarlet uniforms, the black bearskin hats, stomping around in their jackboots. Well, he was one of those. So I think jackboots were the cavalry, stomping around anyhow. So they perform their public duties as in these ceremonial things, but they also do real duties. They also involve in fighting, but only there's a major war because they're guards and they guard the royal family and the Queen. And indeed, until about 1970, some guards used to march to the Bank of England and back each night, partly guarding that against robbery. So that was that. He was able to hang around London and lead his social life and blah, blah, blah. So then the Second World War broke out. You might think there's quite a lot of promotion because by the time the war broke out, he had several years military experience. And in the war, people got killed as well. So there are more gaps opening up, allows for rapidly moving up the ranks. But that didn't happen to him. He only ever reached the rank of captain, which suggests he actually wasn't brilliant at it. And going back to Northern Ireland in his uniform, sometimes recruiting people on the street, and there are quite a few people from the Republic of Ireland joining as well, and at least half the regiment was Catholic as well. So remember, when he was a little boy, the IRA came and burnt down his house. This is in the first Troubles, and his mother said that despite this, he must never be anti-Catholic, so that stayed with him. He also joined the Orange Order. Now, the Orange Order, well, is founded in the 1790s. There's some dispute over when exactly it was founded. Originally it was a Church of Ireland only organisation. Then it was for all Protestants, whether Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, Plymouth Brethren, Quaker, whoever wants to join. And they support the monarchy, that's the British monarchy, so long as it's Protestant. Supposing it was to change to be Catholic or Hindu or something, they wouldn't. Hello there, Saif Ghazali. How's the sword? I know what your name means. Safe, not as in safety. Saif, perhaps I should pronounce it. Anyway, so what else about Terence O'Neill? So wearing their black bowler hats and their collarettes and parading around the 12th of July to commemorate the Battle of the Boyne, which was fought in 1690, actually on the 1st of July, but since we moved from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar of the British Isles, we jump forward 11 days. And they meet in their lodge houses and they donate to partly keep the lodge going, and they donate to charity. That's the Orange Order. And saying you mustn't marry Catholics and whatever, or never attend the Catholic Church because of its fatal errors of Romish superstition and things like that. So, they're against Catholicism as a theological position, but some of them will go further and they're just against Catholics as a whole. I don't think Terence O'Neill was, but there he was, and it really had cross-class appeal. There were upper-class people like him in it, and middle class and plenty of working class people. People who were really poor couldn't join because they had to pay a bit and buy the clothes, and they couldn't afford that. It was a bit like a trades union as well. It was a bit like a friendly society helping each other out before there was a welfare state. Obviously, it's a shadow of its former self. It's much less potent than it used to be, but it was almost quintessential if you wanted a career in unionist politics in those days. So he left the British Army shortly after the Second World War, and he went into politics, and he took over his mother's constituency. He was elected there. That was that. Lord Brookborough was the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland. And remember, obviously, if you're a peer of the realm, you wouldn't get into the House of Commons in the UK, centrally in London, but you could get into the House of Commons in Northern Ireland. Hello there, you're watching Wisconsin. Reality is an illusion. Wow, it must be scintillating viewing. You're just riveted. But part of Northern Ireland had House of Commons and it had a Senate. And the Senate, the Lord Mayor of Belfast was there ex officio, as was the Lord Mayor of Derry. And the others, I can't quite remember how the rest of them got in. I think they were chosen by the House of Commons, but the trouble is then that reflected the composition of the House of Commons a bit too much. And he held various portfolios as a minister and moved up the ranks. The trouble is he was known to be cold, aloof, conceited of himself. Thank you, I like your channel. Well, great, I'm very glad of that. He spoke in this fruity upper-class accent. These were these clipped vowels, well, a bit like my accent, but with knobs on. It was advanced received pronunciation. In the 1960s, BBC announcers, army officers, particularly in the Guards regiment, spoke like this. It was a very posh regiment amongst the officers. The men were usually very working class. So it was a different era. We're casting our minds back over 50 years ago when there was a great gulf between the different social classes. and he felt like he was born to lead kind of thing. And so a lot of the Unionist MPs, well, most of them came from humbler backgrounds or middle class or even working class backgrounds, and he wouldn't acknowledge them in the corridor. He sometimes didn't even know their names. There are only about 50 people in the House of Commons there, and on the Unionist Party there are about 30 of them. So yeah, he did not have much emotional intelligence, and perhaps had this patrician attitude that there were officers in other ranks, and there were other ranks, he mustn't mingle with them. Can you do an impersonation of John Burko? Order! 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 I can't believe he was doing it, like he was camping it up, even though he's very straight. So, anyway, 1963, Lord Brookborough decided he wished to retire, and so who was going to be leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, and only the MPs got to vote, so he won quite easily. So he was fairly effective at the Ulster Unionist Council, their conferences, and that was that. He was Prime Minister of Northern Ireland. There was a governor as well. I can't remember who it was. So some peer of the realm who was governor represented the Queen there, even though it was in the United Kingdom. So remember, it was the only devolved legislature within the UK back then. There was no Scottish Parliament, no Welsh Assembly, no London Assembly, none of these directly elected mayors or anything like that. So he took over. And in the early 60s, the Unionist Party was quite worried about the Northern Ireland Labour Party breathing down their necks. The situation was quite calm. The IRA had a brief terrorist campaign in the late 50s, been quite easily quashed by the security forces, and the fact that the Catholic community overwhelmingly rejected the IRA's overtures, didn't want conflict, accepted Northern Ireland was in the UK. They often wanted to change it, but there was a constitutional means to do so. Anyway, so things were quite stable. Economic growth was sluggish. Have you done a video on the Scottish Highlands? Well, I filmed some when I was up there, but not talking about it like I am now. So what next? Really was to reduce unemployment, raise standards of living. Northern Ireland was about the poorest region of the UK, if you divide it into roughly 10 regions. Try to improve the situation. Then there was an organisation called the Campaign for Democracy in Ulster, and they pointed out the Unionist Party had been in office for over 40 years. The Unionist Party was almost entirely Protestant, and there was a lot of jobbery going on. Bob's your uncle, jobs to the boys, and housing was allocated by county councils, city councils, and so forth. A lot of people were public sector employees, not just police, but or teachers, but or civil servants. But I'm just trying to think. Anyone who worked for the council, collecting rubbish, even sweeping the streets, whatever. And there was a suggestion that the Unionist Party tended to favour Protestants because they were very likely Unionist voters. Even though they actually voted for the Unionist Party, they were almost certainly weren't nationalist voters. They might vote for the Northern Ireland Labour Party. No, the DUP was only founded about 1970. So, because the Reverend Ian Paisley started to make a name for himself in the late 50s. Ian Paisley, born 1925, he set up his own church, the Free Presbyterian Church, and it was starting to be a public figure by this stage, but he didn't stand for election until the late 60s, and well, he was to be the nemesis of Terence O'Neill. So the Campaign for Democracy in Ulster, they said, oh, there's sectarian discrimination. They pointed out that O'Neill's wife had once advertised a job for a Protestant housemaid. I do like the Irish band U2, they're all Dubliners. And they published a pamphlet called The Plain Truth. This is the Campaign for Democracy in Ulster, saying there's lots of discrimination, we must tackle it. So I remember Tim Pat Coogan, is the court historian of the IRA, said that the nepotism in the Republic of Ireland was worse than anything Unionists did. But anyway, that was that. It must have a broader appeal, unionism. People often say, oh, the Catholic community is growing. Higher unemployment amongst Catholics than amongst Protestants, partly because the Catholic majority areas in the west of Northern Ireland had higher unemployment generally, like Derry, like Tyrone, particularly the western part of the county. Strabane had the dubious distinction of having the highest unemployment in the United Kingdom, that town. Fermanagh, these were economically depressed areas. Protestants tended to be wealthier, not hugely wealthier. The upper class almost exclusively Protestant, the middle class mostly, and then the working class. But, you know, there's a division within the working class. There's the aristocracy of labour. People got permanent jobs, well, police, or some fairly skilled jobs like plumbers and electricians, down to unskilled labourers who are just bidding for work all the time, out of work most of the time. But anyway, Harold Wilson became Prime Minister of the UK in 1964. And he then was saying to Terence O'Neill, you know, 1/3 of Northern Ireland's budget is a subvention from London. So if you want that subvention, you better play ball. I want an end to this discrimination. Obviously, there are no discriminatory laws and no discriminatory practices. We point out the Nationalist Party held a few councils and a bit of discrimination out there as well. Anyway, O'Neill decided to reach out to the Catholic community, and he visited a few Catholic schools. I remember there's some footage of an old nun saying, you know, he's very welcome, we hope that he'll come again. It's his first visit to a Catholic school, we hope it won't be his last. Often Catholic schools wouldn't particularly have liked him to be there. Most people say, well, I mean, I know an Irish woman said, I said, why are you a nationalist? She said, because I'm a Catholic, that's it. For some people, Catholic equals nationalist and Protestant equals unionist. And really that's wrong, but that's the perception. So I remember reading Bernadette Devlin's book, The Price of My Soul, and she said, oh, well, we felt we couldn't play sports matches against a Protestant girls' school because after netball they'd want to sing God Save the Queen, we'd feel deeply uncomfortable about that, and blah, blah, blah. And so, people who are nationalists would want to display the tricolour, which was allowed, but if there's a complaint about it, saying this might cause a breach of the peace, then the Royal Ulster Constabulary, the police, would come and remove it. Anyway, trying to improve relations with the Republic of Ireland, Sean Lemass had just taken over as Taoiseach there, and so it was a new era. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to stop now.